Welcome to the Physical Product Movement, a podcast by Fiddle. We share stories of the world's most ambitious and exciting physical product brands to help you capitalize on the monumental change in how, why, and where consumers buy. I'm your host, Ken Ojuka. In this episode of the Physical Product Movement podcast, I speak with Ted Fleming, founder and CEO of Partake, a non-alcoholic beverage brand. Ted talks about when he was given a devastating medical diagnosis and how that inspired him to create his product. Ted also talks about why he knew in his core that there was a market for his product, even though others thought it was a terrible idea. Ted also shares the surprising actions he took after his manufacturer delivered him a bad batch of initial product and how that led to the creation of a different product that he still sells to this day. Ted is a great entrepreneur and was a fantastic guest. I hope you enjoy. Yeah. Hey, Ted, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Ken.
Yeah. Where are you located? Where am I finding you?
Today I am in beautiful Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Nice. I hear it's absolutely beautiful up there. What's the outdoor scene like in Calgary?
It is a phenomenally outdoor-oriented city. We're less than an hour away from the Rocky Mountains, world-class skiing, mountain biking, hiking. If you're into outdoors, this is a fantastic place to come. Banff, which maybe some of your listeners know about. It's literally an hour from my door here. So we're very, very lucky and grateful to live in this part of the world.
Nice. Have you lived there long, or is this recent?
Yeah, I lived in Toronto for most of my adult life, and my wife and I moved out here with our three young daughters in early 2018. Just looking for a bit of a change. Maybe that's the entrepreneur in me, just being open to new things. We've thought it's been, although half the time has been in COVID and some form of lockdown, it's a great place to raise a family.
Nice. Well, we'd like to kick off the podcast with a quote. And I didn't check in with you. Do you have a quote in mind that you could share with the audience, something that motivates you or has been impactful to you in some way?
Sure. So, one quote that I particularly like is, the little details all added up make a big difference. And even this morning when I was working with my personal trainer, we were talking about the same concept of, you're putting in this little single workout, but, if you do it over the course of a year or several years, the results are astounding. So I think it applies both to business and personal life.
Oh, yeah, that's a great quote. Do you know who said that originally, where that comes from?
I got it from a book I read a few years ago, and I think it's called The Messy Middle. And hopefully the author forgives me for forgetting their name at this right here. But the book's called The Messy Middle, and I found it to be a very insightful book. Yeah,
The Messy Middle. And so, Ted, why don't you tell us, for people who don't know, about your company, why don't we start off by just telling us a little bit about what Partake Brewing is?
Sure. So, in order to do that, I need to take everyone back to 2005. I was a few years out of college, having some good success in my professional career. I was a high level athlete playing sports at the professional level at the same time.
Which sport?
I play squash.
Cool.
So a racket sport that's pretty popular here in Canada. And, just things were looking up, and all of that came crashing down. I started to have some severe abdominal pains, going to my doctors, having a series of tests, and ultimately was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And that was a huge change in my life. And it took me several years to really change my perspective on that. And it wasn't until 2010 when I had a pretty big flare up. I needed to have some surgery, and I spent almost a week in the hospital. And it was in the hospital. You got some long hours alone to think about sort of where your life is going, and having a serious scare like a surgery and unexpected surgery and hospital visit motivated me to think about, the changes I needed to make. And eating healthier, drinking healthier were big parts of that, as we're reprioritizing family. And one of the specific things that came out of the health and wellness part of that was a decision to give up alcohol. And for many people, alcohol is a really important part of how we socialize. For me, after playing sports, having a beer was a big part of that experience. Family events, holidays, you'd often just find yourself having a drink and socializing, and it was a social lubricant that helped connect with other people. And when I took that away, I realized, how important that was in socializing. And it was even more acute because as I was dealing with this other condition, Crohn's, I needed my support network even more. And in a way, it was a double whammy, because I was taking it away in some ways with not drinking and finding that connection harder.
Sure.
And so, I'd go out to bars and restaurants with my friends and try to keep that connection up. But ultimately, you are almost treated like a child. Your options were water, soda, juice, Shirley Temple if you were lucky, and it was a very juvenile set of options if you were not drinking alcohol. And so I looked to other countries for some inspiration. Europe was way further ahead in terms of the development of non-alcoholic beer. I was a beer lover, so I started importing some of that product into Canada, started an online store around that. And then, I didn't really know what I was doing when I started it. I was just solving a problem. And what I ended up discovering was I was building a community and really being a lightning rod for change and for making people's lives better who were going through some of the same things I was. And eventually that community, they helped me by saying, hey, can you get craft non-alcoholic beer? And I couldn't source it. And, we were still too early. Most brewers I talked to said, there's nothing here. There's no market. There's no opportunity. I disagreed with them. I thought there was. And so I created my own brand in Partake Brewing. And it's been, wildly successful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. A couple things I wanted to dig into was, so even just your last comment, where people were saying, oh, the market's not big enough, there's not really opportunity there. But you disagreed. What do you think it was that you were seeing that maybe other people weren't?
I think it was the fact that this experience touched me personally. I knew it, deep down, that this was something that was important to me, and it allowed me to feel like I was normal. I could go out and have a great beer and have the craft beer experience and feel accepted. And I think that personal experience is what kind of kept me driving forward, even when people would tell me. And I remember vividly at a industry conference in 2017, I said, I'm going to make a global beer brand and we're just going to make non-alcoholic craft beer. And someone said, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. That's never going to work. And, I'd love to have a beer with that person today. But, I had this conviction early on. And, in hindsight, you kind of recognize, look, if I wasn't early the way I was, it would be so much harder to compete. True innovators have to be ahead of the curve and have to be told things like that in order for them to know, I'm onto something because I'm early. If everyone said this is a great idea, you're probably, a year or two too late.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. It's almost like you have to find an idea that actually is a good idea, but on the surface doesn't necessarily look like a good idea, right? If it looked like a good idea, if it was obvious that it was a good idea, everybody else would be doing it. Right. And that means that there's not really that big of an opportunity for you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we were the first really company in North America to launch a craft non-alcoholic beer line. Today we're competing against 30 other products. We're in a great position because we were first and we built, we built variety and we figured out all the problems early on, and now we've scaled. And, the guys coming in now are, they're your MBA grads who are like, oh, this is a growing market. And like all those signals are there now. We had to do it
Right.
based on intuition before and saying, hey, we think this is going to happen before the data said it was going to happen.
Right, right. I mean, an analog that I think about is like Airbnb. When you hear the founding story of Airbnb, I mean, they were laughed out of so many rooms and investor pitch meetings. Everybody thought it was just an idiotic idea, right? But it turns out it was actually a pretty good idea. It was disguised like a bad idea, but they were seeing something that I think that the greater market wasn't, and so it sounds a little bit similar. You saw this non-alcoholic beer market. You saw it in front of you, but it wasn't obvious to everybody else. So let's dig into that a little bit. One of the things that I was really appreciative of is when I went to your website and you just click on your story, immediately you open up about this experience with Crohn's disease. What do you think that being open with your story and kind of telling these challenges, what do you think that's done for your brand and for your company?
Yeah, I think today there are so many brands that lack authenticity, or they try to manufacture authenticity. I think my story and just being open about it serves two purposes. It says, hey, we're open and authentic, and the purpose behind our brand comes from a real place, from a real person, a real challenge, a real story of overcoming a big obstacle. I think that appeals to, so many different people. Even if you're not interested in non-alcoholic beer, I think people will say, hey, if I was going to be into this category, this is a brand I want to associate with. There's lots of brands out there that have some good purpose, but, I think in many cases, in CPG, consumer packaged goods is probably one of the better ones for authenticity, but there's still tons of brands out there that are, they, in my mind, they go to the purpose shop and decide, okay, what purpose are we going to tack onto our business? And then they do it. And, some good comes out of that because they support some good things, but it's not part of their original DNA. And I think that's an important distinction for our business, relative to our competitors.
Yeah, and I totally agree. One thing that I took away from it, I mean, it's just a powerful way to kind of infuse your brand with some emotion immediately. I listened to the news segment about your diagnosis and how you kind of took that challenge and then were able to thrive after. It's like I felt like I had an immediate connection to you and by association to your brand. And I think that that's something that a lot of brands could learn from and do more of, lean into that.
Yeah. And so, I think for me too, right. I feel like I owe the Crohn's and colitis community to tell the story and to raise awareness and to, hopefully be somewhat of an inspiration that even though you may be diagnosed with Crohn's or colitis, that, that doesn't close the door on great things for you in the future.
Yeah, agreed. Do you think that you've been able to find a market in that community? Like, do you know other people who suffer from Crohn's disease that have actually started buying your product because of your story or because they had similar challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we get lots of messages from people that have similar. Have had similar challenges to me with Crohn's and colitis. They feel, I think they feel welcome to reach out because my story is that public and it's a big part of the why behind Partake Brewing. So I think we hear a lot from that community. I'm not going to say that stopping drinking is a one size fits all for anyone with Crohn's and colitis. It's a very individualistic condition where everyone needs to figure out what works for them and what doesn't. But I would say, as a whole, reducing your alcohol consumption is a healthy thing to do. And, everyone needs to find out what the right level of that is for themselves.
Sure. So let's dig into well, actually, before we do that, this news segment. How did that come about? It looks like a Toronto, our Toronto news segment. What was the story behind that? How did you get on that?
Yeah, I think it comes back to like we've gotten some phenomenal media attention, and I think it goes back to the authenticity of my story and us being a first mover and really trying to change the conversation around alcohol and its role in society, and can we still socialize and have fun and have all the sensory experience of craft beer, but in a healthier way. And I think that story just resonates with a lot of people, and we're fortunate to have gotten some great media because of that, and because I think the story resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah. So did they reach out to you, or did you reach out to them? Did you hire somebody to do this, like a PR consultant or something like that? How did that happen?
Yeah, like today we definitely have a PR agency that works with us, but that was early days. It was still, I think I was a one person business at that point, so it was probably just me hustling and throwing out some emails and hoping something would stick. And I was fortunate that probably came from that hustle.
Mm-hmm. And do you know if that particular segment had much of an impact in your sales? Like, were you able to see an uptick, or were there any particular sort of media or news coverage that you felt really kind of bumped, gave your business a nice bump?
No, that certainly had a great impact for us. It was a local Toronto story, but definitely had a lot of feedback that people saw it, people wanted to try the product. They were excited about it because they saw it. More recently, we've had some great articles in Forbes and a bunch of other business publications. The Globe and Mail, which is the Canadian national or one of the Canadian national newspapers, has done some great stories on us and is interested in us, not just from a personal level, but also as a successful business. So we're seeing a transition from it being, I get a bit more of a personal story in the early days because the business hadn't really developed quite yet. And but today it's more about, wow, these guys have really done exceptionally well from a business point of view, and obviously the tie back into being early and being innovative and taking risks and the purpose behind the business all flow into that as well.
Right. And it looks like you were the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in 2021. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been named a finalist, and this actually just came out this week, so that's hot off the press. But it's an incredible program and award to be part of. And I just look at the list of other finalists, and I'm very humbled to be part of that amazing group. And I'm sure there's tons of other amazing entrepreneurs in the US and around the world that are also part of the program. So very grateful for that recognition.
That's awesome. Well, I think that that you guys have certainly had quite a bit of success. What I want to do is just go back in time a little bit, and just hear a little bit more about the founding story. And so you were diagnosed with Crohn's and colitis. You still wanted to be able to socialize. Having a beverage definitely lubricates the conversation, keeps things going. What I want to dig into a little bit is what were some of the first steps that you took in order to actually make sure that, hey, there was a market here, and then trying to find a product, sourcing your product. Let's go back to those days and tell us kind of what the steps were before you actually founded the business.
Sure. So I'll take you back to 2013. So I started in the non-alcoholic beer business really as an importer and an online store operator. So, I took my inspiration from Europe. There were some established breweries there making what looked like some quality product. I began to import and consolidate those in Canada and built an online store around that. I I still remember to this day, my first order, and you see it come in online, and you're like, oh, someone ordered from us, amazing, and I hand delivered that product, and we grew that business to a couple 100,000 in sales, and learned a lot about the business. I had thought, okay, well, maybe we could do that. We could do we could create our own product, but I didn't have a consumer packaged good background. I didn't have a brewing background. I learned those things in those intervening years while I was also learning how to do online marketing and e-commerce selling and getting feedback from our customers, what products they like, what they didn't, where there was opportunity. And one of those opportunities that was identified was no one was making craft non-alcoholic beer. And clearly, on the alcohol side, that was just an incredibly fast growing part of the overall beer market. I think it reached 20% of total beer. Maybe it was in 2018. And, people were clamoring for craft beer styles like IPA and pale ale and stout. And so, that was really, it was really about.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It was really about learning in those first years and listening to customers and to our community and understanding the role that I could potentially play.
Yeah. So for those that aren't familiar with the distinction, of craft beer, that's obviously, it's been a huge trend. It's been growing. Could you give us a little bit of background and just tell us kind of what you saw in the alcoholic beverage market and then how you applied that to the non-alcoholic beer market?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people associate craft with, styles that, different styles, particularly IPAs and hoppier styles of beer. I think craft beer was built around hoppier, higher alcohol products. And, that was a big departure from, the prior 30 or 40 or 50 years in beer, which was all about macro lagers and light beer. So it was a totally different sensory experience, and from those IPAs, the products evolved into other styles. And so there's not really a definitive way to define craft. There's been some work by the Brewers Association to try and do that based on volume and so on. But from my point of view, I very much view it as a stylistic difference. And the batch sizes being maybe a bit more, having a bit more variance, that, you could have the same beer from a brewery in 2 different months and they'll have differences. Whereas, the macro beers are very much, you get what you get, and it's consistent month over month. And, for some people that's what they want. And for other people, they like that little surprise of, the beer being slightly different batch to batch.
Understood. And so how did you take the trend that you were seeing there and see an opportunity in the non-alcoholic beer space?
Yeah. So when I got into developing Partake Brewing from our online store, and again, it goes back to the feedback from our customers, no one was making an IPA in the non-alcoholic format. And so that was really our first goal. And we said, hey, can we make a non-alcoholic beer, an IPA, taste good, less than 0.5% alcohol? And we had some other constraints like no money and no brewery. So we combined those constraints and said, okay, well, how do we develop our product? And it took a lot of iteration, a lot of trial and error, a lot of batches. I made some faces that were not good faces tasting some of our batches. So we went down a lot of wrong turns and dead ends, but eventually got to something where we thought, hey, this isn't bad. And we took it to, we partnered up with the local college. They had a pilot brewery system, and we were able to bring on board some professional brewers and microbiologists to help us with our process and our recipe, and commercialized our first product in September of 2017. And we'd actually pre-funded it with a Kickstarter campaign in April of that same year.
Okay. And how did the Kickstarter campaign go?
It was a resounding success. We we benefited immensely from that online community. We'd already developed from the online store. There were so many people there that were just like, I'm going to give you my money, because even if I don't like IPA, which was the product we had on our Kickstarter, they said, I'm going to give you my money because I know you're going to make something that a style that I'm going to like, and you're the only one doing it. And so I'll buy 5 cases of IPA, even though I'm just going to give them to a friend. So we met our Kickstarter goal, which was $10,000 in the first 3 hours of our campaign, which was amazing. It put us on like kind of, top projects list on the Kickstarter homepage. And by the time the campaign was done, a few weeks later, we'd more than tripled our original goal. So very pleased with the outcome, and that that success was what allowed us to actually talk to brewers in a more serious manner about making our product, when they knew that we had close to $40,000 sitting in the bank ready to make the product. So it's there was a lot of putting the right foot in front of the other, and then repeating. And again, going back to my quote, there's a lot of little details that went into that made it a success.
Yeah. So I want to dig into a couple of those little details. So for most Kickstarter projects, they put it out there and it doesn't go well. And even the ones that go exceptionally well, a lot of times there's a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of marketing that goes into getting people to that Kickstarter page, reaching out to media outlets to promote it, that kind of stuff. Did you guys do any of that, or why do you think that you were such a success on Kickstarter?
Yeah, we totally took a pre-launch. We had a pre-launch plan. We planned it out, 8 weeks in advance. We started talking to our community. We started doing some online ads. We were building our email list. We were starting from an email list of around 4,000 people from our online store. So we were in a good spot. We had some good data in terms of how to target our ads. And then we were able to leverage the fact that we were already an existing business into some media as well. So, I'd say probably 80% of our revenue came from our existing community, or the community we assembled pre-launch, and probably only 20% came from post-launch.
Right. And even the fact that you were running ads to your Kickstarter campaign, right? Promoting it. That's something that I think a lot of people don't realize, that there's just a lot of marketing that goes into making these things a success.
Yeah, I think a misunderstanding is that the platform will bring the audience. The platform itself will bring almost nobody. You have to bring the audience to these things.
Okay, so you have a successful Kickstarter campaign. You start reaching out to brewers, who are taking you a little bit more seriously now. What were the next steps? What next? What happened next?
So we signed on with a brewer. They were willing to take us on because of the success of the Kickstarter campaign. They saw that we had some money in the bank, so they were keen to help us spend that. But the first batch was challenging. There's a lot of excitement around it. It's going to turn out great. We were 2 months behind our schedule. We were hoping to have the product to people early July. We didn't get it shipped till September, which in the context of Kickstarters is really good.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
A lot of them end up 6 months to a year, or if not more, late. So we were pretty good in that context, but obviously we would have loved to have met the target we had and given people beer in summer. So when we got the first batch, the brewers came to me and they said, "Oh, it's amazing. Here's the beer." And I tasted it and I said, "This is not the beer. This is not the recipe I gave you." And we went back and, they tried to convince me it was, and I was adamant it wasn't. And we went back and went through the recipe, and, I found something. I said, "You guys incorrectly transcribed my recipe onto your, manufacturing sheet." And then they took a double take and were like, "Oh yeah." so they kind of admitted, yeah, we messed up. And so, but I was in a bind. I had 500 cases of a product that wasn't the product I was intending to give customers. they were clamoring to get it because we were already late. So I was in a bit of a bind, and the way I approached it was I went out to those consumers. I didn't try to tell them that this was what I intended to give them. I fessed up and I said, hey, this is what happened. They made the beer. It's not to spec. It's not what I was intending to give you. However, it's perfectly consumable. It was way hoppier and way more bitter than the spec product. So I said to people, hey, this is what we've got. If you like hoppy, hazy beers, I'm happy to send it to you, but I don't want to send it to you under false pretense that this is what I intended to send you. So I was able to get half of that product moved to consumers who kind of raised their hand and said, I'd love to try it.
Wow.
We got a second batch done that was to spec, and I got that to the other people. We ended up selling out of that first batch. And to this day, I've got customers saying, and we actually named that first batch, we called it Hoppy Accident, because we had so many customers who loved it. It's a little bit too niche for mass market, but we're going to bring it back this fall and have it available in our online store, which is almost at our 5-year anniversary as a company. So it'll be a pretty interesting launch for us and kind of bring us full circle back to that very first batch.
Yeah, that's funny. What did you do differently for your second and subsequent orders with this and other breweries? What were some of the lessons that you learned from that first one that if you were to do this all over again, you would definitely make sure to do?
Yeah, I think the big learning out of that is you have to be transparent and honest with your customers, and you have to stick to your guns. Like I could have gotten rolled over by my brewer perhaps, and then tried to, tell the customers one thing, and half of them would have been upset and half of them would have been happy. But the way I did it, I think I made them all happy. And I think that's there's a lot that we can do wrong that they'll forgive us for, because they know, we're gonna do the right thing. And I think, that was, our business could have been over before it even got started if I had taken the other path there. So I think it's important to be transparent with your customers, to have, some ethics behind your business, to be truthful and for particularly with something that people consume. They have to have a high degree of confidence that you are not going to put out something that isn't of the highest quality and to the specs that you say it is.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that also, there's a lesson there about just transparency, right? I think that's a common theme, throughout this interview. What about in working with your brewery? Because sure, you had some issues with that first batch, but you're definitely not the first person that has received something a little different from their brewer or their manufacturer or their co-packer than they expected. What are some of the lessons around that and working with your manufacturing partner?
Yeah, I think you need to know your own product extremely well, and you need to work with them, because they're important partners. They're fundamental often to the success of your business, and you need to select and work with them only if they view you as kind of equal partners. The first brewery we worked with, we stopped working with them because we didn't have that feeling. But subsequently, we've partnered with breweries that give us the impression that we're very important to them, that they're proactive in making sure product doesn't leave the brewery that isn't 5 tasters, 5 out of 5. If 5 out of 5 don't say this is the way it should be, like, it doesn't leave the facility, and we figure out how to work in improving that, and also figuring out how to split the compensation or the cost of some of those things. So that's a very important thing to me, that our brewery partners, manufacturing partners, almost act like they're internal. They're part of our organization, and it's important to them that whatever they produce for us and whatever comes out as the Partake brand, that reputation is our reputation is their reputation. That's what we really like to see in our partners.
Yeah, and I think that there's some real lessons there. I mean, it's almost cliche. Most people who start manufacturing something in the physical product space, their first, maybe even first couple batches can be pretty rough, and I liked your comment about treating them like an internal partner, that they're almost like a part of your business, and they are partners in every sense of the word. And so, treating them like they're internal, I think might maybe says something about your interaction, your close interaction, your daily interaction. What did that look like, and maybe what was different about that with your first brewery compared to the breweries that you're working with today?
Yeah, we got the feeling with the first brewery that it was transactional. It's, turn out the product, get paid, turn out the product, get paid. With our, our subsequent partners, it's, we ask ourselves questions when there are problems, and there inevitably are.
Mm-hmm.
What if you were me, what would you do? What makes sense? What would make you feel like this is fair? Whatever we do is fair to fix a problem. How do we improve it in the long term? It's less about blame. It's more about continuous improvement and making the relationship stronger and better and longer lasting. And I think that's a frame of mind. And I think it's incumbent on our company to have that as a cultural element. And it's incumbent on our partner breweries to have that as a cultural element. And when we can get alignment on those core tenets, then you have the basis for a very successful relationship.
Sorry, can you say that last part again? It's core on those tenants, and you have did you say base, or you cut out?
Yeah, I think if you're aligned on those core tenants, then you do have the basis for a very productive relationship.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Well, let's actually wrap up here. Me and you could talk forever about this, and we could also talk about other subjects. I think before we started recording, we were talking about our kids and family life and all that. Let's move on to the quickfire rounds. I've got 4 questions here for you. Just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. You ready?
All set.
All right. What's one tool or resource that you feel has helped you the most in your career?
Reading a lot has been so helpful. I didn't expect myself to be a CEO, but there's so many great resources out there. I think Medium as a platform has so many great user generated articles about being a CEO and work-life balance. That's been super helpful to me.
Awesome. Yeah, right along those lines. What's one book or that you could recommend to people?
Atomic Habits is a great book. Again, it's kind of in alignment with that quote of mine, but just very helpful insights in breaking big things down into small things and chipping away and, hitting a lot of singles and scoring a lot of runs, doing it that way.
What is one piece of advice that you'd give your 21-year-old self?
I'd say think bigger. I think one of the things, looking back about early on in this business was I didn't realize how big it could be. I realized it more than maybe some other people, but if I would have thought bigger earlier on, I think we'd be in an even better place than we are today.
And who's somebody in your line of work or another entrepreneur that you look up to that maybe you'd love to take to lunch?
Wow. Yeah, there's so many out there. I'll give a shout out to someone who's on my own team, like my head of sales. He's been phenomenal. He's taken us from, 2 million in sales to north of 15 in a very short period of time. He's a wealth of knowledge. So, Steve, shout out to you. I owe you lunch.
Awesome. It's nice when that person is within your company. That's great. I think, we want to wrap up here. I wanted to ask though, what are you looking forward to with your company? What's coming up? What does the rest of the year look like for you?
Yeah, we've got some really exciting summer flavors that are available in our online store. You can get it at drinkpartake.com. We've got a summer radler based on our blonde ale and cold pressed juice, and we've also got a peach goza, which is amazing. Our communities just can't say enough good things about those two products, and perfect refresher for the summer heat. So very excited about those. And then on larger U.S. retail gains, we're really excited about new partnership with Wegmans in the U.S. Northeast, and we've got a bunch of California retailers, Ralph's, Vaughn's Pavilions, Bevmo, that we're super stoked about as well. So business is going great, and we can't say enough good things about our fans and customers, because they're what make the magic happen. So
Yeah, and of course, people can go to drinkpartake.com, and they can also order online. That's another way to get to you. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, maybe by email or LinkedIn, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And just quickly back to the product side, I think one of the things that people love about our product, not only is the taste and variety, which are top notch, but our products are as low as 10 calories a can. So again, for summer and people trying to stay healthy, it's a great product.
No doubt. In fact, that's a huge reason, just to switch over and do the non-alcoholic thing for a while, is just lower the calories and just be a little healthier. That's definitely a big motivator.
Yeah. And people, it's, for us, we see it as an enabler. That there's, without the drain of alcohol, and in many instances, it allows you to do so much more in life. And, for me, going back to my story, it's a refocusing of what's important. And for me, it's my family. It's driving this business forward. And I don't know if I could do that if I drank alcohol. So it's an enabler for definitely some bigger and better things.
Well, this is a good note to end on. Any parting words for other entrepreneurs out there in the physical product space, that are currently in the grind, currently trying to get to that next level. What would you say to them?
I'd say to them, just keep at it. There's certainly some challenging times out there. You gotta power through. And I'd say, really focus on solving problems. If you're solving a problem for someone, it may just be a small group of people in the beginning, like it was for us, but that's so important that you're solving real problems for real people. So I'd focus on that and make sure that's a core element of whatever business you're working on.
All right, Ted. Well, I think that's a good place to end. I appreciate you jumping on today. I think we've learned some things. I wish you the best of luck. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ken. It was great to talk to you.
All right. We'll see you. The Physical Product Movement Podcast is brought to you by Fiddle. To find out more about Fiddle and how our industry-leading inventory ops platform is giving modern brands and manufacturers full visibility into their inventory and operations, visit fiddle.io, and then make sure to search for Physical Product Movement in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Fiddle, thanks for listening.